started because it's still counting.
I don't know. Where- not-
Okay, great. Trisha, I think you're muted there. Still muted.
How about now?
There you go.
Great. Okay. All right. Thank you everyone for bearing with us while we got that sorted out. So good evening and welcome. Just a few notes. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and the video and the slides will be available to attendees after the meeting. And the video will also be available online on our YouTube channel. The chat function is turned off, but if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A feature and someone will either respond to you via message or we'll get to your questions at the end of the webinar. If you need to, you can turn on closed captioning by clicking at the bottom. There should be a little button that says CC and that'll turn on captions. Just note that they're not always 100% accurate. Okay, and next slide.
So here's a brief outline of what we'll be covering during this webinar. We'll introduce ourselves, give an update on the hearing and scheduling. We'll go over a brief overview of what the Bay Delta Plan is and its significance, and some key talking points related to the plan. We'll then go over how public comment works and how to provide effective public comment, and we'll show some examples. Then we'll have time at the end where we can demonstrate what that looks like and open it up to anyone who wants to utilize the space to practice speaking. That is optional though. Finally, with whatever time is left, we can address any of your questions. The next slide, please.
So I'm Trisha Velasquez. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Central Valley organizer with Save California Salmon.
And I'm Abigail Black. I'm a policy specialist with Save California Salmon. We also have Michaela working behind the scenes to keep an eye on the Q&A as we go. Next slide, please.
Okay, so we want to start off with, we have an important scheduling update. Some of you may know or may not know the Bay Delta hearing that was scheduled for September 24th and 25th. As of yesterday, the Water Board has canceled the hearing and all public comment that was associated with it. So this means that there will not be a meeting next week, and the previous deadline for submitting public comments has also been canceled. And if you've been following us online for a while now, this also means that the rally that we scheduled for next week is also postponed for now until we get more dates from the Water Board. And according to the Water Board, they're planning on recirculating documents around December of this year. And once those come out, they will also be rescheduling the public comment opportunities and another hearing. So please continue to follow along with us as we watch this process and stay tuned for updates. This just gives us more time to learn and prepare for future public comment. We'll still be reviewing the plan as it is now, since we will have other opportunities to have our voices heard, such as at upcoming Water Board meetings that happen each month. The next one being on Tuesday, October 7th. And we'll drop a link in the chat to the Water Board's event calendar. Next slide. You are muted, Abigail.
Thank you. So we'll go over what the draft Bay Delta Plan is. The Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan is often shortened to the Bay Delta Plan, and it's California's blueprint for how water is managed in the San Francisco Bay and the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta watershed. It sets the rules for how much water can remain in rivers and how much water can be diverted. And it establishes standards for water quality and safety. Since the Delta watershed is connected to so many other rivers and tributaries, the plan has major implications for many other waterways in California, including the Sacramento, San Joaquin, American, Feather, Yuba, and Bear rivers, and many others. So this will impact fish and wildlife, tribal beneficial uses, and communities that depend on these waters. Next slide. And I also wanted to share the connection to the Trinity River, especially because the draft Bay Delta plan, their picture there doesn't show the connection all the way up from the Bay Delta to the Trinity River. So you'll see on the left-hand image is on the lower corner, you have the Sacramento River. And then on the right-hand image, you can see how the Sacramento River connects to the Trinity through the Trinity River Division and the Shasta Division with the Clear Creek Tunnel. So this is to just illustrate that the Bay Delta plan is not just about the Bay Delta. It impacts all rivers that flow into it. And it's important to note here that the Trinity River flows are critical to salmon survival on the Klamath. And this region is very important to the Yurok and Hoopa Valley tribes. And we now know that the Bay Delta plan has very serious impacts to Trinity River storage. Next slide, please. So we have a video to share with you if everything works out on the technical side. This is a short clip we'd like to play from a really awesome presentation from the Lookout. There's this guy who does some work with geography and fire mapping. So this should hopefully give some more visuals to the different watersheds and how they are all connected. So just give us a moment to switch over so that we're able to show this video to you.
Go. And this pink area in the middle is the Sacramento River watershed. The purple is kind of the upper Sac. And then down here is the Bay at San Francisco. Down below, we've got, in brown here, we've got the San Joaquin River watershed. And then south of that, we've got the Tulare Lake Basin, which is basically the Southern Sierra rivers drain into this kind of dry, right now it's a dry lake, and in the past it was a giant wetland marsh in the Southern San Joaquin Valley. So when we talk about the Bay Delta, we're basically talking about the waters that drain into the San Francisco Bay. And so that basically starts way up by Lakeview, Oregon on the Sacramento River. And the Sac flows down south through Sacramento, and they come together here in the Delta. And so as we come up from the Bay through, say, like the Carquinez Straits and through Martinez, we get into this vast wetland area that's it's really complex. Just all these different channels that come together, and it's also, as you said, super highly engineered. So if we look at like all the levees in black here, all the main channels are basically levied in the Delta. Those red lines just show like all the streams that would have had connectivity to the Sac River without dams that no longer do. The Trinity River over here, water from Trinity Lake gets diverted through the mountains to Whiskeytown Reservoir. And from Whiskeytown, it gets dropped into either Keswick or into Clear Creek. And so when that happens, it lowers water levels in the Trinity, which can cause fish kills down lower on the river down towards Hoopa and on the lower Klamath. And that water is federal water. And so it goes to irrigate these federal water districts. A lot of them are down in the San Joaquin Valley, like the Westlands Water District, down here by Los Banos.
Awesome, thank you. And if you can switch to the next slide. Hopefully you all found that to be useful as a visual showing how all these waterways are connected all the way down into the Bay Delta. We'll next cover what the voluntary agreements are. If you've been following us on social media, you've probably seen many of our posts referencing the voluntary agreements, but sometimes the question remains, what are they and why should you care? The simplest way to describe them is that the Bay Delta Plan follows two possible pathways, the first of which is the regulatory pathway. So this is the more standard path that upholds environmental laws and standards. It includes numerical requirements for water quality and flows that water diverters have to follow to be able to protect drinking water and also to protect species, tribal cultural uses, and other beneficial uses. The second is the voluntary agreements, otherwise known as VAs, just very shortly abbreviated. This is the alternative path that was decided behind closed doors with only major water diverters present, and it excluded tribes, fishermen, scientists, rural communities, and others. And the VAs allow these water diverters to essentially bypass standard environmental regulations and laws and instead provide them with this sort of narrative requirement as opposed to a numerical requirement for water quality and flows. Since these narrative requirements do not have any real numbers that they have to meet, they are way easier to ignore and they're not as enforceable. This means that there's not really any accountability, and it can allow water diverters to take excessive amounts of water, regardless of the impacts that it can have, which can fail to meet flow, habitat, or temperature goals that are especially critical to salmon survival and the protection of clean drinking water. Next slide, please.
Okay. And so another major issue with the current version of the plan is that it includes these exclusive decision-making groups, one of which being the Stanislaw Tuolumne Merced Working Group. This group includes, excuse me, this group includes state and federal agencies, as well as major water diverters, but notably does not include tribal representatives, communities, or any other interested parties. This group can decide how much water is sufficient for flows for fish and how to do adaptive monitoring plans, and they make these recommendations directly to the water board, which essentially means that water diverters can regulate themselves with no public or tribal input. So this and any other decision-making groups need to include multiple tribal representatives and other interested parties, not just water diverters. Next slide.
Okay, so we have some primary talking points that we'd like to focus on. Even though there isn't a hearing scheduled for the plan yet, we know that they're still working on the plan and can call on the water board, and we can call on the water board now to make sure that when they do release the next stage, that they are taking these primary points seriously. We demand that the plan reject voluntary agreements and require numerical, enforceable flow and temperature protections, that it includes meaningful early tribal engagement and decision-making abilities, as well as co-governments at a minimum. And also that it follows science-based standards and hold water diverters accountable. We will also be able to link in the chat here to a document containing these talking points in a more elaborate way. So if you're interested in using those, in your own public comment or just to get a better understanding, that will be linked in the chat. Next slide.
All right, so now we'll move on to how to give public comment in general. So first and foremost, it's important to know that members of the public have a legal right to comment on issues such as this. There are several laws at multiple levels that we won't go into detail in this training, but just remember that you have a right to speak at public meetings except for in certain circumstances. However, agencies are allowed to set their own protocols for how public comment works. So it's important to pay attention to how a meeting that you're going to attend is run. Usually there's a set amount of time that each person is allowed to speak. This tends to range between 1 to 3 minutes, though you can sometimes get permission ahead of time to speak for longer. You must follow whatever procedure that they have for getting in the queue. So for instance, if you're in person, they may have you submit a card. If you're online, they may have you register ahead of time or raise your hand online to speak or whatever other process they have. But if you miss the cutoff time for this, you may miss your chance to speak. So just make sure that you pay attention to when they make that call to join the queue for what the item that you wish to speak on. In-person speakers generally go first, followed by virtual, and then on to people that are calling in via phone. And since we usually don't know how much time we'll have per person before a meeting starts, it's always best to prepare for having a short amount of time and hoping for longer. And it's also important to note that most public meetings will be recorded and comments will be made into part of the public record. So just use caution when identifying yourself if you're a member of a marginalized group, especially now with the political climate that we have, and use your best judgment when speaking just to keep yourself safe. So it's always a good thing to keep in mind, as well as doing a risk assessment and making sure that you're not putting yourself in danger. Next slide. So when you're called on to speak, introduce yourself briefly, I'll emphasize the word briefly, and state any association you have. I've oftentimes seen this is where people can get stuck giving too long of an introduction, and then you realize that you're out of time and didn't get to say what you wanted to say. So just keep it short and sweet for your introduction, and then try to stick to your main points that you want whoever you're speaking to, in this case the water board, that you want them to take away, and don't be afraid to make it personal, and tell them how this decision will impact you or your family, your communities. And they'll usually have a countdown timer up on the screen so you can keep track of how much time you have and how you may need to change your message to adjust to the time that you're given. If you get nervous, it's okay to take a breath, collect yourself before continuing, and just say what is most important to you. It doesn't have to be perfect. The main goal is just to make sure that they hear you and your communities and what you have to say. Next slide. And so everyone is different, but some things that I found that can be helpful are to write down notes of your main points ahead of time, or even a full script that you can just read off when they call you if you don't want to forget certain things. I've personally used both methods depending on what the meeting was about, and sometimes one works better than the other. If you have time, I definitely recommend practicing out loud what you want to say and time yourself. You'd be surprised how much you can say really quickly or really slowly, especially if you're nervous. So timing yourself is always helpful. And then take notes of the main things that you want to say if you only have a short amount of time, and then note any additional points that you would want to add if you end up having extra time when you're speaking. It can also be really helpful to have something to take notes during any presentations that were given or other speakers that might remind you of other points that you want to make sure you make or topics that you want to address. For example, I've been in meetings where I had a comment planned and then I heard an opposing speaker say something that I thought was very deceptive and misleading and wrong. And so I felt the need to kind of pivot what I had planned to make sure I incorporated that into my comment. So just things like that to keep track of if that's something that you want to do. Next slide. And so a really important aspect to giving public comment is to speak from the heart. There will hopefully be many other people showing up at these meetings to share facts and data. And while those are very important and you can absolutely make them a part of your comment, some of the most impactful comments are those that include personal stories. I personally have spoken in meetings before that were related to important animal relatives. And I spoke as an Indigenous person about what that relationship meant to me and how important the decision outcome of this meeting would be for me and my cultural relationship. And I felt like it made it much more impactful and harder to ignore. And so a basic example of this could be something like we have on here. The proposed Bay Delta Plan and voluntary agreements will lower water flows and make river temperatures warmer. Low flows in warm water can kill fish and lead to lower salmon returns. My family depends on the Bay Delta for food and drinking water, and without an enforceable science-backed plan, I worry for my kids' future. I hope you make the right decision and reject the voluntary agreements. So that's just an example of how you might combine those two things. Next slide. So for some people speaking at meetings like this, it comes really easy, but for a lot of people, myself included, it's really stressful. And so I also think it's just really important to, after you speak, allow yourself a minute to decompress and breathe and drink some water and probably stretch out your super stiff neck and shoulders from the preparation that it took to speak, and just be proud of yourself that you spoke up for yourself and your community. It's also helpful to take notes, maybe after the meeting, of noting things that you did well or things that you want to practice more for future meetings and future comments. So for example, you might notice that you spoke really clearly, but you got too into the details and you ran out of time and didn't get to say some of your main points. Or that, next time you want to have a better tech setup if you're speaking virtually, or wear more comfortable shoes if you went in person, things like that, that just will help you feel more confident and comfortable the next time that you participate in a public comment. You might also want to make note of other speakers that and or staff that you want to speak more with later or thank for their comments, or find cool organizations that you want to follow and make note of that. And then afterwards, if you attended with the group or other people that attended, it can be really helpful to debrief with others and either celebrate wins or rant about things that didn't go well, and just talk about how it went and have that community aspect of it as well. Okay, next slide. Okay, so that was sort of the overview of how public comment works. And now we have some time to practice if anyone wants to. Abigail and I will demonstrate kind of what this looks like. So we're going to put a timer on the screen. Hopefully everyone can see it. And we'll give an example of what it looks like to present a public comment. So, I don't know if I can just do that on mine, but I'm not the one sharing.
I don't have anything like that myself. I don't have a timer.
Hmm.
I'm not sharing
Okay.
anymore though.
This one does not have apps, so we'll just do it old school then, and I'll I can time I can use the timer on my phone.
I can go first too.
Okay. Um, all right. So, aha, there are apps. One moment. Let me just see if I can get this up here so you can get a. I feel like the countdown timer is part of the fun of giving public comments. So let me see if you can start, if you can see it.
Yeah, and just for background context, when you attend a public hearing, they'll give you a time frame that you can speak. So we chose 2 minutes because that seems to be the most common. And it really depends on how many people are showing up to speak that day. So if there's a lot of people, maybe you only get 1 minute. If there's not that many people, you could have 5, 10 minutes or unlimited amount of time. But we chose 2 minutes just to give you a feel for being under a little bit of the time pressure, so you can get used to that realistic expectation. Okay, so I'll go first, and Trisha will time me. So
But can you see the timer on my screen?
I can see it. Yeah.
Great.
All right. So, hello, and thank you for the opportunity to comment today. My name is Abigail Black. I happen to be in Colorado at the moment pursuing a graduate degree. However, I have been a resident in the San Francisco Bay Area for over 11 years, and I plan to return to the Bay Area after my graduate degree. So, what happens in the Bay Delta is particularly important to me. I urge you to strengthen the Bay Delta Plan to protect water quality and ensure adequate flows for fish and safeguard communities that depend on our healthy Northern California rivers. Salmon and other native species require sufficient cold and clean water to survive. Current conditions have already pushed these populations to the brink. Decision makers must also account for the worsening impacts of climate change. Rising temperatures, reduced snowpack, and more extreme droughts will further stress river systems. Without stronger protections, these factors will compound existing water quality problems, accelerate fish declines, and undermine the resilience of ecosystems and communities. I urge you to please adopt a plan that restores flows to levels that support fisheries, improves water quality, and incorporates climate change adaptation into long-term management. The health of California's rivers and the people, tribes, and species who depend on them requires nothing less. Thank you so much for your time.
Awesome.
I had 10 seconds left.
Okay. And then to make it extra fun for myself, I did not write mine out to demonstrate what it looks like when you're just going at it from the heart. So I'll go ahead and start my own timer here, but that was awesome, Abigail. All right, so hello, my name is Trisha Velasquez. I'm calling and speaking as myself, as a member of the public, and I want to speak to the Water Board today to call on you to reject the voluntary agreements that are included in this version of the Bay Delta Plan. These voluntary agreements have been challenged by many groups for many years because they are not sufficient, They do not provide adequate mechanisms for holding water diverters accountable. They don't provide adequate mechanisms for making sure that enough water stays in the rivers for water quality, drinking water, for fish, for tribal communities to continue having relationships with these fish that are here. And for me personally, as an Indigenous person that is working to connect to my own culture, one of the main ways that I do this is by connecting with the land and my relatives, which are the plants and animals. And this plan does not protect those relatives of mine. This threatens not only my ability to maintain those relationships, but other Indigenous people as well. And we deserve to have clean water. We deserve to have these relationships. And so I urge you to reject these voluntary agreements and adopt a plan that actually follows science and people and communities, and is a better plan for the Delta and everyone in the area. Thank you.
Great job speaking from the heart, Trisha.
That timer is a lot. Okay.
Right on time, too.
Yeah, 2 seconds to spare. So yeah, that is a demonstration of how that goes. You have that fun little timer up in the corner. It gets really stressful when it gets down to those last few seconds. And another thing to be prepared for is that if you go over, you will most likely be interrupted and cut off. So like if I had kept talking, they would cut me off and say, okay, it's time to move on to the next person. So that's just something to be aware of too, that especially if it's a very busy meeting, there's not really a lot of wiggle room to just keep going past the timer, and they can be really strict about it. So, yeah, if anyone is curious to try, now would be a time to do that where you're not in a public meeting. Obviously, no one has to. And if no one wants to participate in that, then we can, we do have another video that we can show that kind of goes over public comment stuff as well. And then we'll move on to questions. So if anyone wants to try it out, just drop something in the Q&A and we can promote you to a panelist. We'll give it about a minute just to see if anyone wants to do that. And if not, then we'll move forward with that video.
One thing I would add, hold on, I'll turn my video on. Hi, I'm Regina Chicazola with State of California, and it's really good, like Trisha did, to also bring in your personal and lived experiences when you do your comments. It can be very easy to get caught up in the wanting to sound really smart and have your facts in order, and you do want your facts, but it's always best when your facts are following up with your personal experience and values, especially if you're a youth or someone who lives in a salmon dependent community or is impacted by challenges with clean water, because that's really what gets to the water boards and to the decision makers. They sometimes know a lot about the facts, and it's really good to bring them up to be like, 90% of the salmon have declined within the last 10 years or something like that. Those are good things to bring up, but having your own personal story, introducing yourself in your language, things like that, talking about the work that you've done to restore salmon and how this might impact you personally does really make a difference. It might not seem like it would, but it really does.
If we have a volunteer, Nicole would like to try speaking. So can we get Nicole promoted to a panelist?
It's been a long time, so thank you. I appreciate any practice I can get.
Mahim Sintamana ke kanema, Nicole Anna Round Valley ke Anna. Thank you to the Water Board for allowing this time and space to provide a public comment. I would like to ask that the Water Board uphold their promise to the tribal people to allow and promote the traditional ecological knowledge bearers that are in our community. I am a member of the Round Valley Indian tribes, which means that my tribal connections to the waterways in California span from the Mendocino all the way to the Pacific coast, from the Pacific coast all the way to the Nevada border. So the tribal territories that represent my tribes and our background are connected to Sacramento River and the Bay Delta, and mean a lot to me and my family. Again, the knowledge and the history that our tribes share and the connection to these rivers are extremely important, and we deserve to be acknowledged as scientists as well. I would also like to ask that the Water Board, as some of our comments are and concerns are that these voluntary agreements had happened behind closed doors with only a few participants, and some of those participants who are water users of the diversions, there are not clear and clear documentation of those water rights for those diverters and people who have these water rights that are, claiming the water and the diversions as equally. The tribes have not been offered the same, you know, rights or responsibilities that are to be upheld for our water rights. So again, thank you for your time. And I appreciate the time and the space. And I strongly encourage and ask you to reject the voluntary agreements.
Thank you so much, Nicole. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Great to see you as well. Great job on your comment.
You too. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nicole. That was awesome.
Thank you.
All right, that looks like we're ready to go to that video. If you'd like to share it, Regina, and then we'll move on to the Q&A and close out.
Sorry, just give me a second to find it. I have a lot open. Here we go. All right, this is a video that was made by a youth intern, Lemoni Hut, and she has been testifying at water board meetings since she was 8 years old, and she is currently going to college at on the East Coast at Harvard University.
The first time I did a public testimony to the California State Water Board, I was just 8 years old. I have been speaking at these public comments ever since. This is to say that anyone can give a public testimony, no matter your age, experience, or educational background. California State Water Board meetings are open for the purpose of hearing from the general public, including you. Being a member of the community is the only and the best qualification needed. Okay, so to start, usually you must register for your public testimony in advance. After signing up, you will receive a number. This will be the number they call when it is your time to speak, which is usually shortly after the briefing. Most of the public testimonies I gave were over Zoom, but they can also be in person. Either way, your presentation will be in front of the California State Water Board alongside other community members who are also testifying or listening in. Also, if speaking in public is too frightening, you may also send in a letter instead of speaking in a public setting. Testifying is a matter of finding what is most comfortable for you. Now, I would like to go over a general outline on how to write a public testimony. Start by introducing yourself. Then, address the issue and the purpose of the speech by noting the meeting's topic and how it is negatively or positively impacting the environment and or community. Then state the action you are in favor of. To add heart to your speech, include why the subject is important to you. This can be done by bringing in a personal story related to the issue and subject of the speech. Talk about how the issue affects your family, culture, or the community. This will help the board to see the overall personal and societal significance of your testimony. By adding heart, you are making your statement a reliable and relevant source because it shows that you have firsthand experience and are affected by the agenda topic. Also, this allows for the board to see the situation from your point of view and hopefully draws out sympathy or empathy. Most importantly, it puts a long-term perspective on the situation and it begins to make people think about what effect this decision will have on the future community members. If possible, outline how multiple communities will be impacted by the board's proposed project or action. In the case of the removal of the Klamath dams, it is important to say that disruption of salmon runs will destroy tribal culture, fishing economy, and ecotourism in many towns along the Klamath and Trinity rivers. To close out your testimony, circle back to the beginning by restating the purpose, much like you would write a conclusion for an essay. Finally, include what you hope to gain by addressing the benefits of properly fixing or addressing the issue. Share how the lack of action has caused personal harm and cannot be continued. Remember that there's usually a time limit, so be sure to be as direct and to the point as possible. This can be done by practicing and timing your speech beforehand, which will help you feel more confident when testifying. These are a few pointers that I have to help you write a powerful public testimony. I would like to acknowledge that speaking and writing speeches for public testimonies is a learning curve, and it's more than okay to make mistakes. I try to encourage everyone to show up and speak. It doesn't matter how great your testimony is. What matters is that you're there and the board can see how many people care.
Awesome. So there's a lot of points that were repeated there, but it is important when you're practicing to think about these things over and over again and to practice over and over again, because the more you testify and the more you do comment and the more you practice, the more comfortable you'll be.
Yeah, thank you, Regina. That's a really good video. Okay, so let's see. Let's move on to questions. So we have one in the question box. In lieu of the hearing and rally next week, are there other ways to become involved with action and learning about the Bay Delta Plan and protecting the Delta? So I can do a first answer and then Regina or anyone else if you want to add on to it. So I would say that even though that is not happening next week, the Bay Delta Plan is still happening. There will still be a revision that they will vote on at some point and a hearing in the future. So I think following along with what the water board is doing, even just like signing up for their email list, they have one that is particularly for the Bay Delta Plan. Can be a helpful thing just to stay on top of when they do make those announcements, so that you're aware of when that's happening. And attending the water board monthly meetings can also be a helpful way just to see how those meetings go, and how they're structured and how the water board sort of operates. And yeah, that's my first answer to that. Regina, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, one thing I would mention is you can always, there's a public testimony time period at 9 o'clock at the beginning of any water board meeting, and you can testify about anything you want within your 3 minutes there. So you can get in there and ask for protection of the Bay Delta salmon. There's also a lot of other public comment periods that are happening. And the water board told me today that people can comment in writing on the current reiteration of the Bay Delta plan, even though it's not a formal comment period. Also, I think we really need help with like letters to the editor, sharing events, hosting events, and sharing information. And just today, for people who are also interested in like the Klamath River or the Smith River, there's going to be a public testimony hearing on both the Klamath River and Scott and Shasta rivers, and on the Smith River in Northern California about pollution issues for both of those rivers on October 7th, I believe. We'll be posting about it in the next couple days. So there's a lot of opportunities to get involved in the Bay Delta plan. Even in the Bay Delta is not the only thing going on. There's also flow processes in the tributaries, and some dam removal processes happening in the Bay Delta, along with on the Eel River. So even though the Bay Delta plan hearing will probably not be till December or January now, you can write a letter to the editor, you can write to the water board, you can go give public testimony at water board meetings. And if you're interested in other watersheds too, we really do need comments on the Scott and Shasta and Smith River pollution plans next month.
And I would just add that we're really active on Instagram. Our handle is California Rivers. We're doing almost daily posts about relevant topics in Northern California rivers. So we'll be sure to keep you updated on anything related to the Bay Delta Plan and how you can get involved. If you're on Instagram, you can follow us there.
Yeah, there was another question about where to get more information about the Bay Delta plan. And so I put a link to the plan itself and also reiterated what Abigail just said, that I'd say probably the easiest place to look would be on our social media, because we've put a lot of flyers together and condensed talking points and informational slides on that. So that would be my first answer to that question.
We also have quite a lot of videos on our YouTube that go into the Bay Delta Plan, along with the Delta Conveyance Project, the Shasta Dam Raise, Sites Reservoir, and all these connected projects. So our YouTube is a really good resource, and our education and our rivers page on our website, which is California Salmon, also have quite a lot of information.
And then there's one last question. I'll leave this one for you, Regina, for how much you want to answer this. But there's someone says, thank you so much for this training. Could you clarify the relationship, if there is one, between the VAs and the Delta Conveyance Project?
Yeah, so one thing to remember is that the VAs are the VAs and Sites Reservoir and the Delta Conveyance Project are all very connected. The people who wrote the VAs are a lot, there are like the state water contractors, the Department of Water Resources, and other water, big water agencies throughout the Delta and in Southern California. And those are the same people who also will be invested in Sites Reservoir and will be building the Delta Tunnel. And so it's just, and it, for a very long time, Metropolitan Water District in LA said they didn't want the Delta Conveyance Project or the Delta Tunnels, or the Delta Tunnel, it was two tunnels back then, without the Sites Reservoir. Because what they want to see is for the Shasta Dam to be raised, so there's more water storage there, and then for Sites Reservoir to go in and take any of the excess flows, which means anything above the lowest baseline. And so there'll be way more storage of the water within Shasta Reservoir and Sites Reservoir. And then that water can be released to fill up the Bay Delta Tunnel. And so, or the Delta Conveyance Project. And so that what's interesting about this plan update is originally it said that 75%, up to 75% of the water needed to stay in the Sacramento River. So the Bay Delta plan threatened the ability to build Sites Reservoir, do the Shasta Dam raise, and put in the tunnel. And that's why I think that Governor Newsom and the voluntary agreements parties decided to try to hijack the Bay Delta plan in order to do this voluntary agreements instead, so that they could, put in more dams, more diversions, and take much more water from the river, which if the Bay Delta plan was protective and based on science the way it was supposed to be, there'd be a lot less opportunities to move water through the Delta Tunnel or to store water at Sites Reservoir. And another one of the things that's being proposed right now is to let parties join the voluntary agreements after this whole process is done. So that probably means that the Delta Conveyance Project and Sites Reservoir would join after the fact, even though they didn't give anything up to get to the voluntary agreements.
Okay, and then we have one more question asking if there's a template for the comments that can be personalized. We don't have a template necessarily, but we do have some condensed talking points that you can use and build your comment from. So I'll see if we can get that put in the chat as well. But that's probably the best sort of resource for that to kind of see what some of the main talking points are, and then you can decide which of those that you most want to speak on and add your own story to that.
And I believe the one-page Bay Delta talking point document should be in the chat right now. It'll also be on our social media and our website. And there are talking points already on our social media. It's just not a printable handout like this. And we only have 2 minutes left. There is one more question. It's slightly complicated. It says there are government agencies listed as water right holders who have signed off on the VA agreements. And what does that mean? I'm guessing that might mean the Bureau of Reclamation, the state or the Federal Bureau of Reclamation. And because the Trump administration has been changing the laws and the agreements and kind of moving so quickly, everything is very much in flux. It has anything to do with the feds and the Bureau of Reclamation. But right now, I think they are partners in the agreements. Oh, it sounds like the Forest Service too. But I would say anything to do with water right holders that are on the federal level is very much in flux and could change at any point. I mean, the voluntary agreements were part of the current endangered species biological opinion through the Bureau of Reclamation, and right now they seem like they're not implementing them as part of that anymore, or even implementing a lot of the biological opinion. And their new viewpoint is that public doesn't get to comment on biological opinions and they can change them in any way they want without scientific input. So I would just say we're not going to really know the answer to that probably for a while until we see some decision notices coming out.
Okay, well, it looks like timing working out pretty perfectly there. We don't have any more questions in the Q&A, and we're coming right up on the hour. So I just want to thank everyone for joining, and I hope that this was helpful and that you feel more emboldened to show up to public comment, not just for the water board, but for other issues that are important to you. And I'm always happy to answer questions. So if you have any, feel free to reach out to us.
And just a note, we will be tracking the next version of the